Brilliant. And leave that little prompt in of me prompting Sjoukje there. That's literally perfect. We've got 100 episodes, we still can't get this shit right. Welcome to Cloud Realities, a conversation show exploring the practical and exciting alternate realities that can be unleashed through cloud-driven transformation. I'm Dave Chapman.
I'm Sjoukje Zaal.
And I'm Rob Kernahan.
Sjoukje Zaal, back on the show, visiting us again. How are you doing?
Very good, very good. Lots of exciting stuff going on at the moment around Gen AI, right?
I would expect nothing less.
Yeah. It's all about AI nowadays.
It's everywhere. I've just bought an AI-enabled toothbrush, so yeah, I'm expecting perfect teeth in a week. Yeah, no,
that's a steep curve, Rob.
Really, or is it a bit hallucinating?
Yeah. Well, look, on today's show, we are going to have a very important conversation. It's the balance between governance and legislation and the rate of technology innovation. I can't think of a better subject for what we think might be our 100th show.
No. Hang on, Dave. This was ultimate confusion this morning. This is what I'm confused about this week is I came downstairs, I looked at the title, it says episode 100. And I'm like, we have not done 100 episodes on Zencastr.
So where does the 100 come from?
Well, I don't know. We'd have to ask our producer because I think he's making stuff up.
You booked this guest because you said, we've got a big guest. We're doing the 100th episode of the show.
It's a big hurrah.
Let's go.
Let's go. Yeah, we're all wrapped up and really excited because it's episode number 100.
And just give me
literally 20. We did 20 episodes ago.
No.
So, I was also a bit confused when I was taking my notes. I filled in 100, and then I saw a gap of lots of episodes.
I would say a solid 25 episodes.
Guys, it's all the live episodes. We did 30 live episodes. So in total, it's 100.
I think that's marketing spin. That's what
producer
I'm
math.
Say. Producer maths. Yeah, that's we've created a new concept called producer maths.
So let's try and straighten this out. We have a CR number on each episode. What's the CR number for this, Marcel?
70.
CR70. Okay.
So Dave, so for the basics, 70 plus 30 is 100. So this is episode 100.
So I think, Robert, in terms of your confusion this week, has that resolved it for you? Is that the first time we've resolved it, or do you think we've actually got to a place that is meaningless?
It's marketing spin, Dave. I'm just going to hold marketing spin on this one. But let's pretend that it is 100. Woo! We've done 100.
Yeah.
I suppose technically we've done 100 where we've sat around and talked about something.
Well, the good thing about doing the producer math version of the 100th episode is when we get to CR 100, we'll be able to do it all again.
Yeah. Actually, that is okay. So I'm down with this now. So we get to CR 100 and we can do another 100th. I like that. We have two. It's like having two birthday parties or two stag do's or two. Well, no, not two weddings, but we'll skip that one.
It's a wholly different thing.
Anyway, let's move on now.
All right, so let's get on to our main subject for today's show. So joining us today to talk about our main subject, the importance of legislation in innovation and technology, is Bart Groothuis, member of the European Parliament. Bart, thank you so much for making some time. I know you've got an extremely busy week with elections coming up and lots of other things going on. So I just want to say a quick hello and tell the listeners about yourself.
Well, thanks for having me, Dave and Rob. It's really an honor to be here. I used to be a cybersecurity practitioner. I love the internet. I love computers. I love it. And I love technology. And you know what? Technology is becoming more and more important for geopolitics than before. It used to be geography. Why should we care what is happening in China, far away from home? Now, technology is entering our homes, is entering our vital infrastructure. I want to legislate that. I want to make us prosperous and secure and safe for the future. That's my mission. And my best mission is to make the invisible threat visible. Invisible threats in the digital domain and making good legislation so we keep prosperous and safe in the future.
So let's start with the role of the EU generally in cybersecurity, and particularly for those listeners that live outside of the EU. So Bart, can you just get us started with a bit of context, please? What's the role of the EU and specifically in cyber?
Well, initially, member states didn't think the EU had anything to do with cybersecurity. It was a national competence. And in 2016, the NIS1 is the first piece of legislation that was put forward in order to bring some regulation into cybersecurity from the European Commission. And that was seen as a first planting a flag. It wasn't really effective. It wasn't harmonized. It was really, just the first set of principles to say we need to do more get serious about cybersecurity. The NIS2, which recently has been published, and I negotiated for 2.5 years in Parliament with the Council. That has really put forward a stringent set of regulations, making new critical infrastructure, making sure they do a better job at building resilience, but also that the government does a better job at delivering services to those companies and those vital infrastructure institutions.
So in today's cyber landscape, you can see from a perspective of individual organizations and why they need to look after themselves because of the cyber threat. You can see a nation state requirement to look after themselves because of an ongoing background threat. What's the advantage of having an EU-wide view on the situation, and why is that so important?
Well, formally, the legal side of it says it's the internal market. So if you do business and you have several factories in the Netherlands and Romania and Italy, and you have a cyber incident across, you will be handled accordingly to a harmonized set of rules. You have to report those rules. And it means there's no false competition, right? Because it also entails some costs, and you should make to do more about resilience. But I guess the other part is also that the law enforcement agencies and many member states see that as a national competence. But we also see, just like in the COVID crisis, we've seen those hospitals really been flooding with patients. And the same is true for our police agencies and intelligence agencies and national cybersecurity services, etc. They're flooded with incidents. And I think that you need to mitigate that. And it is a waterbed effect. And if you see other large blocks in the world, like the US or even India and China, and everyone's really stepping up for their resilience game, the hackers will come to Europe. So, also from that perspective, geopolitical perspective, you need to do something. Last but not least, it's an instrument from the Kremlin as well, a foreign policy instrument, right? Weakening our economic infrastructure. That is really what's going on. If you look at Colonial Pipelines, a large hack against critical infrastructure in the US. If you look at the malware, and I like to review malware, it wouldn't have gone live if there was a Russian keyboard attached to it, really. There's an agreement between the Russian state and those hackers. You can do whatever you want, weaken those Europeans, if you just let the Russians alone. Feel free to do so. So we have several arguments to put forward new legislation.
I see. So the NS2 directive specifically, let's take a step back. What is it specifically, and how does it help, and how does it function?
It creates about 150,000 odd new vital infrastructure institutions in Europe. And it means hospitals are now part of the scope to do more about resilience, building a resilient infrastructure for business continuity. You might get hacked. There's no 100% security, right? But what we do have is making sure that you are up and running when it happens. And you get aid from the government, assistance from the government. So it requires a lot from those institutions, saying you deliver essential services to the European public, then we demand you to do more, and we demand from governments to help those institutions more. It's about getting running. And I mean, the best proof, the best pudding, proof of the pudding is in the eating, but it's from Moody's. And Moody's is a credit rating agency, as you know. We know from the financial crisis, but they rated the NIS2, this piece of legislation. And you know what they said? It's credit positive for doing business in Europe. It means that if you have something in Europe, the business continuity of your business is better guaranteed than outside because of this legislation.
So maybe give us a bit of an insight into the process of creating it. I'm interested in the process inside the EU itself, the debates that you had. Just walk us through that, and what were the challenging moments?
Well, it was an entre-deux in good French between me. I'm a cybersecurity practitioner by practice from the Ministry of Defense in the Netherlands, and now I'm in the European Parliament. It's good to bring something along from your previous professions. And on the other side, from the Commission, it was Commissioner Breton, and he was CEO from Atos, one of the big software firms you might know, and the European Council was also very interested in building resilience. But together, Breton and me, we said, this legislation needs to have teeth. Like he said, if I was CEO and I didn't have any liability, for example, personally, I'm not sure. If I would invest in cybersecurity, I would see it as a cost. And so we said it needs to have some form of teeth. So I called my friends from the Dutch Team High-Tech Crime Police and some of those practitioners who negotiate with Russian cyber criminals. And I said, we have about 2 years to negotiate this file. And I would like you to ask those Russian criminals, when you negotiate with them, how do you set a price? So you hack into a hospital, you hack into a company. How do you set it? And he said, and we built an Excel sheet, and it was between 1.4 and 2.0 of their yearly revenue. Oh, right. So we said, if it has to have teeth, I said to Breton, give me for essential entities, or for important entities, it's 1.4% of the yearly revenue as a fine, and the fine for a critical infrastructure is 2.0. And why? You have the choice to influence the boardroom, the C-level suite, because it's a calculation. Do we give 2% of our yearly revenue to cyber criminals in Russia? Do we invest it in a fine from the European Commission because we don't do enough, or shall we just invest a minor part of it in cybersecurity to keep things running? That's the calculation.
I love the fact that hackers actually have a calculation engine for working out how much to ask.
We're thinking about their business model.
I mean, it's just, they've got a business case and a model behind it. Do you reckon they have a meeting where somebody pitches, we should hack this one and here's the return we're likely to get?
Obviously, there are. They're hacking into scanning infrastructure, seeing where there's vulnerabilities in certain software and hardware, and wherever they come in, they see what is the revenue? Is it important? And we're looking at more and more like we used to look at the business model of critical infrastructure. What is it that you really have? It's like water, telecommunications, and energy, right? But now we say it's about delivering essential entities, the essential services. And why does the European Union say that? It's because it's the business model of the hackers. They are interested. They gain money whenever they gain access to a hospital. That's the logic of business, their business model. That's what we're using.
I'm just slightly disappointed, given some of the sophistication in the cyber world, and there's a lot that goes on there that they use in Excel, and it's like pivot table.
Business developed apps again, aren't they? And the pain of having to manage them. Yeah,
exactly that. And I'm sure you can't go into huge amounts of detail in terms of disclosing some of the inner debates. But what were the sort of objections that you were getting to this as it was going through the process?
Huge objections. The Americans were very, very scared that we would regulate their DNS infrastructure, domain name services. So whenever you type a domain name, it's being translated into an IP address. That domain name services is critical to the functioning of our infrastructure here in Europe and of doing business here in Europe. So we wanted to regulate that. They were extremely annoyed that we had extraterritorial legislation. Well, guess what? It comes two ways, right?
Right.
We experienced pretty significant extraterritorial legislation from the US as well. Mm-hmm. And then touching the root level DNS, for example, I'm an internet geek, I'm an internet governance geek, and I hate us touching root level DNS servers. It means if we have restraint, the Russians and the Chinese will have restraint. And the European Commission has a sort of tendency to touch the internet and regulate it. I dislike it, so I laid forward. Then the fine was a huge fight. The scope. Should it just be for businesses or also for public administration bodies? Well, from the European Parliament, I would say we cannot just ask stuff from our businesses and not regulate the public sphere. It's outrageous. So that was a huge fight with the 27 member states, but we eventually managed.
I see.
I hope it to be 28, by the way, dear UK friends. You're always welcome to rejoin. Let's not make this political, right? Okay, it's just a joke. Okay,
absolutely. We can certainly have a conversation off mic about that part. I can go on about that at length.
Yeah, so, but, when does this legislation go live and how long have companies got to get ready?
Well, after we finished the negotiations deep in the night somewhere, we negotiated 21 months of transposition, and that ends at October this year. So October 24 is the date that should enter into force. But what we see is several member states having difficulties with figuring out how to make it happen. So they probably need a little bit of extra time.
So there's going to be, I was going to say that it's quite complex for all the good reasons that we've talked about. it's important to be protected. But you get a sense when I'm talking to organisations about it that there's different levels of preparedness about the arrival of the legislation.
And I can imagine, right? Your listeners are really curious about what does it mean for my organisation, right? But the basis is this. It's mainly a conversation between you, your organization, if you're vital or critical infrastructure, and the, let's say, supervisory body that really looks into it. I mean, we said for telecommunications, for example, I mean, about 40% is just not patched. It's not internet facing, and it's legacy software, but it keeps the telco running, right? And it's no worries if you have someone from your supervisory commission that says this is fine, we can accept this risk. It's fine. The OT, for example, for a production company, manufacturing company, is very stable. So the oversight body there has a very different role, and it will have a conversation with you when they accept it or not. If you repeatedly have negligence, if you don't accept these standards that are being put forward by the NIS2, then the fine eventually might get into place. But it's not like to say Europe's going to fine new companies, etc. But it is important that you realize it's there, and it might be if you really have demonstrably negligent in your cybersecurity, you will have a problem.
I do think it is important in the way that you've positioned it. That what I like about the way that you're talking about this is bringing up the waterline of general national infrastructure security. And yes, it's enforceable in a way that you may get fined, but actually to sort of turn that around, the way that I think it becomes positive is, let's say you're an organization that really can't afford the best cybersecurity minds in the game at the moment because they're very expensive and not every organization can afford that level of capability. Presumably, having this legislation at least sets a bar for you. So it actually also is instructive as well as something that's kind of trying to hold a certain line, right?
And it's not rocket science, Dave. I mean, two-factor authentication and getting some backups there, getting up and running, doing something about password management, getting some grip and control.
You should see Rob's passwords, Bart.
Yeah.
We have a long debate. Some of I'm a for two-factor authentication, strong passwords, different password every website. Go down.
Strong advocate for it.
Strong advocate for it. We in fact celebrated World Password Day. Some of the crew may not have the same rigor in their password management. Just calling it out again.
No worries.
Not making any comment on that. But no, I agree. The general level that needs to be set for these sorts of organizations is important for those to actually just understand what that means.
It's getting a grip, Dave.
Yeah,
it's not about getting total control. It's getting some grip on your IT. It should be a C-level subject in the board. You should be able to just discuss that in the board and not letting it to some IT guy in the back of your company. No, it should be C-level. And why? Because this is the debate for about 15 years. And I know in the UK, in the Netherlands, in Germany, all the governments are talking, we want this to be a board issue. I know that consulting companies like yours are really trying to get this into C-level. And then now, for the first time in history, we have legislation that will actually enforce that. That's what I'm satisfied with this legislation.
We advocate very strongly for cyber and digital to be a board level conversation. It's integral to organizations. So whether you're doing it for your protection or whether you're doing it for the advancement of your business, it should be central to a board conversation today.
There's a big education though, isn't it? So you look at most boards and you look at their understanding of cybersecurity, and there probably needs to be an education process as well. And I'm sure there's many cybersecurity or CSOs who bang their head on the table when they try and have this conversation. So there's nothing like legislation and almighty massive fine to get the conversation going. So this is it's a good thing.
Well, Rob, to be honest, the European Commission initially proposed for CISOs and cybersecurity practitioners to have a German Berufsverbot, like getting them out of their practition if they don't function. That's what I really said. This is going way out of line. I don't like it as a legislator. So we deleted those parts. We just said the CEO needs to have some scrutiny, and that's it. And what my estimated guess is that insurance companies will say, will go to CEOs and say, well, listen, I understand you don't want extra personal liability. There's so much personal liability going on in the sphere. I guess that we could take that from you. And then middle companies would come in, like consultant firms, etc., saying, well, if you have crown jewels, why don't you segregate them? And why don't you segment the network like X, Y, and Z? And then make sure that you have this. And then we're able to insure your company. This is also an extra cherry on top of the pie. And this is also something I would say. If you look at the US, there's about 15 times more cyber insurance is being sold than in the EU. And why? Because it's a legislative, regulatory thing. And now we in the EU, I expect insurance companies to step in here as well.
So Bart, I say, okay, great legislation, helping organisations understand what they need to do and get better at protecting themselves. But if the worst does happen and there is a breach of some order, I mean, reporting, who do they have to notify? What's the structure around that?
Well, that's a very important subject. I think your listeners would really want to know. If there's a significant cyber incident, you need to report it. And what the European Commission initially put forward is that within 24 hours, you needed to report anything you knew about the cyber incident, including indicators of compromise, technical artifacts, etc. I was a cybersecurity practitioner in the Dutch Ministry of Defense. I hardly managed that within 24 hours. So I said, we're not going to do that. We're really going to adhere to what also the GDPR is complying. That's like 72 hours. You have 72 hours to make, an estimate of what has happened in order to enable others to share those information, to make sure that others are protected as well. We are forming an ecosystem with that. But really, really important is we also have a 24-hour reporting scheme. And that's because you say, I got hit. I need help from the government. Well, that's different. That has never been in any legislation saying, I got hit. Please help me. Within 24 hours, you need to report that, and the government needs to do something about it. And in 72 hours, you could do it earlier. You need to put forward some stuff that you help others as well. That's it. That's the logic.
How does it jigsaw together in your mind with the Cyber Resilience Act?
Well, this is about entities, the NIS2. Cyber Resilience Act is about products and software. And it's really important that it's there. I personally would have advocated more like in the UK and Singapore to concentrate that on consumer IoT, the Internet of Shit. Right, instead of the Internet of Things.
I love that. Yeah. It's quite true, though, with some of the things you think are now connected to the Internet and have been patched in years. You think, oh, my word. Anyway, yeah.
But really, the European Union is going much further than that. And I think everyone developing software and hardware needs to comply with some of these rules, and which is good by itself, right? And there's a lot of risky vendors out there, and we're actually trying to tackle that as well. I didn't negotiate that file myself. An Italian colleague did, but what I did was concentrate on one thing. It's about risky vendors from China. How can we make sure that we can out them from the European market? When you have an offensive espionage program directed against us and compelling every company in that nation to comply with any request that, like in China in the 2017 intelligence law, but also in Russia and Iran, and you have an autocratic view of the world, able and willing to project it in our backyard, then you have a problem delivering products and services on our market. And that's what I make sure there's a legal provision there to make sure that if we want to, we don't want those Chinese products to enter our market, it's there. So that was my biggest result on that piece of legislation.
And if you think about it, lots of people go online, they'll buy a security camera system or something like that, take it home, plug it in, broadly forget about it. But that's a device on the network. Is it patched? What's the access to it? How are you accessing online? What's the company you set a username and password up with, and all this sort of stuff? It's just not forefront of the consumer's mind. But it does allow backdoors into all sorts of things, potentially, for nefarious organisations. And it's easy to insert that type of stuff. So it is important that we enforce this type of thing to protect the consumer, because they're not always well armed with the right understanding when they do these types of things.
A very good point, Rob. And that's exactly what is in the legislation. That's not allowed anymore. And default passwords should be reset, etc. But it's also about lifetime. We define what a lifetime is. A lifetime software support for patches, for vulnerabilities being exploited. You can't have cameras or what you have in your home. You know there's vulnerabilities, and the software producer says, I don't care about those vulnerabilities. I won't patch them. So you're vulnerable in your home, and I don't care. That's not allowed in the EU anymore. I think it's good that we legislate.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
The other thing that's in my mind as we're talking about this is taking a step back from the two specific pieces of legislation we've been talking about is just the general role for governance in how we take forward our digital future and the health that can exist within that versus the, what we know are some difficult downsides. They might be ethical, they might be commercial, they might be nefarious. And it's like how all of that comes together. Now, obviously, the biggest thing in my mind, and I think probably more profound than the cyber threat, is what's going on with AI at the moment, and whether AI at the moment is effectively an almost unconstrained commercial arms race that could get us into a situation where we have got a difficult situation on our hands because we've been commercially racing to get to something that actually ends up then being problematic, or whether it should be something that's argued as actually maybe we want to just intentionally slow down the innovation rate here until we understand what's going on. Where's the EU debate on this at the moment, Bart? Give us an insight into what you guys are thinking around it.
Well, 300 of the most top scientists and CEOs who actually handle AI have sent a letter like, we need to regulate now before it gets out of hand.
Exactly,
and I was in Greece. I like to sail, and I sailed the Straits of Ithaca. And I told my children about King Mithridates in Greece. And he had one wish at the AI of his time, in the ancient times, Zeus, the artificial intelligence of the ancient Greece. And he said, I have one wish, to everything I touched should be turned into gold. And he was the wealthiest man, right? The wealthiest man of Greece. And then his wife returned and his children returned from a long trip, and he embraced them and they turned into gold. So you should really think about how AI is formulating tasks. Is it really doing the intentions you have? Are there second, third order effects? Do we have it in control? Is it human-centered or not? This is the question that Europeans ask themselves. And we made legislation first in the world and if I come to Capitol Hill, for example, the Americans ask me, why don't let Europe regulate it? We want to get big first, but we see the need for regulation. But we won't because we have a dysfunctional political system, because we want Europe to do it as a strong market. And it costs us, it costs Europe a lot, like innovation power, competitiveness, and that hurts me as well. That I see the need for legislation as well. So I think it's a fair balance.
It is a balance, because there is a need to use a technology like this to improve productivity and overall performance, because economic positions have weakened and productivity's a big part of that from a standpoint. But you do have to be careful, because the unintended consequences when out of the box may be very difficult to put back. So you're absolutely right. It has to be a balance, because we need to protect ourselves and do the right things, but absolutely can't miss out on what could be a massive gain.
Because it doesn't improve 2 or 3 times better each year. It improves 1,000,000 times stronger and better and more intelligence each year. And that's the problem. And what if computers eventually decide, I don't know, that oxygen only is causing corrosion? What if they say that we need a green sky instead of a blue because it's better for artistic view? I don't know. You should really always let the computer ask the human, what is your true intention? And that is something that to be legislated now, not later, when we have the problems. But then again, we need to. There's trillions and trillions of economic value there, and I think we will all benefit from it. But the real thing is, to be honest, we call it AI. It's a bit Gen AI, and those are buzzwords, right? Whenever something really gets into, like, say, we don't call predictive analysis AI, but it is. We don't call speech recognition AI, but it is. Whenever something really gets into a commercial practice, we don't call it AI anymore. We give it a specific name. And so my guess would be that for the next term, we need we need a specific legislation to set forward what our norms are.
And what do you think the time frame on that is, Bart?
This is a continuous process. This is a continuous beta version, like software development. This is never done, and it's so fast, and we're always behind the curve as legislators. And I think that keeping into touch with Silicon Valley and with what's happening in China and the EU, this is of utmost importance. Making technology work for. I mean, how many people are into politics that are really engaged into technology? This is a problem as such, and I think that's really essential.
I would suggest that gap that you're saying, that the people who are into politics, are they really into digital, is like a microcosm of the macro decision making problem that's going on around digital at the moment, which is it isn't sufficiently in boardrooms. There are still business leaders out there who think digital is an IT thing as if it was fixing a printer. And actually, we're way past that point, aren't we?
We are. I guess we are. I mean, transforming your business comes through data. It comes through AI. That's the real. If you're a business leader in any form, if you want to transform your business, it's about data and IT. Ah, man.
Exactly that. And the other point that you mentioned in there that I wanted to just pick up on was the legislators are quite often behind the curve when it comes to technology legislation. And it seems to me that with AI, that is a specifically pertinent issue, isn't it? Because of the rate of innovation that's going on in the world of AI. So I wonder if there's even been a conversation that says, you know what, we are normally a little behind the curve on these things because that's just the natural process of stuff. But in this particular case, maybe we need to do something extraordinary.
We need. And, the way that we handle data, for example, we handle data here in Europe very differently than the US is handling data of their citizens. And I think that we have our own norms. And I will not accept those companies to scrape anything online, use it for any purpose, etc. And if the competition is getting as much data on customers and then winning is the competition, I don't like it. I really want a different sort of interaction between consumers and platforms, consumers and producers. This is not healthy for the long term. And also not for our democracy, right? Because the way we sell products online, for example, or because of those data machines behind it, and with the same platforms, with the same management, with the same data, we sell political ideas, for example. It's not healthy for a democracy as well. I think for the long term that Europe is much better regulated than other parts of the world, also for a healthy democracy.
What I also just wanted to quickly touch on is the Digital Services Act, which I think is a framework for illegal content on intermediaries and addresses things like deepfakes. So clearly, with the amount of disinformation that's going on the web today in many, many different types of platform, particularly on social media, stuff like this is important, but people can often have isn't this sort of curtailing my ability to do anything I want on the internet? How does that balance out for you, Bart? And how does the DSA fit into this important framework?
To be honest, Dave, I had amendments put forward on deepfakes about 3 years ago when the DSA was actually being discussed, and I said we need to formulate at least the best of effort obligation for platforms like Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube to detect deepfakes and label them, because accidents might happen. It might be funny, it might be creative. We love deepfakes for many reasons, but it's also dangerous. I want to label them so the public can see this is synthetic media. What actually happened is my amendment was being voted in by Parliament. It was in the trilogues, it was in the discussions, but in the last couple of hours, it fell out of the agreement. Why? Big tech lobby. So what big tech is now saying is says the producer of a deepfake should be held accountable and liable for setting a watermark. Well, tell that to Vladimir Putin. Tell that to cyber criminals. They won't. So I want a deepfake obligation, at least a best effort obligation for platforms. And that's something that's being discussed now in what we call the code of practice, the code of conduct. It's a voluntary code with the 45 largest platforms in Europe, and they are adhering to it. And I would really like to see this being put forward much more strongly than it is now, because accidents might happen.
Sjoukje, good to have you back. How are you doing?
Thank you. Very good. Thanks.
Well, what have you been looking at this week?
So each week I do some research on related ideas in transformation and tech. And this week I thought we should take a look at what the current AI trends in the world of cybersecurity are. So cybersecurity predictions for this year and beyond include a rise in AI-generated threats and the adoption of specialized language models for tailored insights. And organizations really need to prepare for sophisticated AI techniques like advanced phishing campaigns and deepfakes. We already mentioned that. And what we already mentioned as well was that new regulations will drive the need for more cybersecurity expertise in the boardroom to enhance cyber resilience. So a question: how are organizations preparing for the rise of AI-generated threats in cybersecurity? Or maybe the question should be, are organizations already preparing for it?
Well, I think it's that point we discussed earlier, isn't it? About, this is a complicated area and the legislation's helping, but there is inconsistency in the implementation. So I see a maturity cycle where some will be very good because they're naturally very conscious of this stuff, and others, the laggards, potentially, there'll be the mass adoption and the laggards, and that hopefully it won't be too long for some convergence to occur where, as Dave said, the watermarks hit. But I do fear that some have kind of buried their head in the sand a little bit, and they'll need the most help. And I suppose, it becomes law in October, so we'll find out, won't we? But I do think inconsistency will be there for a while.
Yeah, my sense is on your burying the head point, there's two aspects to that. There's intentionally burying your head, which is you're making decisions as a business not to invest in certain things.
Yeah.
And then there's unintentional burying of the head, which is driven by ignorance and a lack of awareness, and potentially a lack of capability, like we touched on briefly in the main conversation. That cyber is getting so sophisticated that yes, there are some basics, but it's getting so sophisticated that actually it's a non-trivial. It's not as simple as a perimeter anymore, is it?
No, and it's like the point about AI, it's a tool, yeah? You can use it for good or for bad. So the tool's out there and anybody can use it. So again, it's like we shouldn't believe that there aren't other nefarious actors out there who aren't embracing it as well, thinking they can make it an awful lot easier for them to get to what they need to get to. So yeah, I just like the things like this are raising awareness and raising it a lot faster than we probably traditionally have done. So yeah, it's
I organized a hearing in the European Parliament about artificial intelligence and cybersecurity, etc. And I had a professor at the University of Berkeley from the US, and he said if I look at the amount of investments in AI, it's about more than 90% as being in the development of AI, less than 10% on the detection of AI. Why is that? If we have public money being spent on the development of AI because there's trillions of money, I can imagine. But the detection of deep fakes, etc., the detection of fake voices for cybersecurity, why are we not investing more in that? That's also a governmental and policy issue.
And it's to protect the developer. It's the sort of thing where you're watching a video on your phone and the phone detects that it's AI and it's likely fake content and tells the individual, be careful, this may not be real. Yeah. And those types of mechanisms need to exist to help the average person in the street just be able to understand this conundrum, because it's massive.
For all of the controversy of what Musk has done to Twitter, he's literally introduced that into Twitter, right? Which is like you get, I can't remember what it's called now, but you get I think it's called, is it community notes or something like that, where it literally pings up underneath certain things saying, a trivial example would be, I'm selling a T-shirt, but I've done it through one of those sites where I'm actually just lifting it off a different site and then reselling it on my site with a €5 uplift or something like that. And there's a bit underneath that says actually the originating site for this T-shirt is blah, blah, blah. So go and have a look over there. Save €5.
Well, protecting the consumer. It's protecting the individual. And that's the point. It's like GDPR legislation. It was there to protect the individual, and it's the right thing to do. At the basis, it is a good thing.
Exactly that. It's a constant balance, isn't it, between legislation and notions of freedom, and getting that balance right.
Yeah.
It feels to me that we're perhaps a little out of balance in the world of digital at the moment, and the rate of innovation is not helping that. So I think an incredibly important subject of our time. And if this is our 100th episode, and we're not 100% sure whether it is our 100th episode or not, I can't think of a better debate to have had, given the sort of things that we talk about. So Bart, thanks again for your time today. It's been a real education talking to you.
Thank you for having me. It's an honor.
Now, we end every episode of this podcast by asking our guests what they're excited about doing next. And that can be something exciting in your personal life. You've got a really good restaurant booked at the weekend, or it could be something in your professional life. And we know you've got a lot going on there. So, Bart, what are you excited about doing next?
I'm really excited about my daughter's birthday. She's getting 10 years of age. And we're...
Oh, wow.
Yeah. We're viewing a movie here inside of our home. 10 little girls. It's going to be a great party. It's the core of what we do. The work is just secondary, right? This is the real important stuff.
That's where the heart is. That is where the heart is. And what kind of movies is your daughter into?
I'm not sure, but I guess that Frozen and all that comes along with Frozen is
the
still
classics. Yeah,
still
although
the classics.
I've heard that film so many times, I find myself singing the songs to myself as well.
Go on, Rob.
Really?
We think it's our 100th episode, so I think it's
Go
time
on.
for you
I'm not singing, so you think you're a snowman or whatever it is, because we're.
I was thinking let it go. I was thinking let it go. Something I say to you on a regular basis.
Not without good AI affecting my voice.
So, Rob, it's Frozen over Jump. So, what is it?
Oh, no, I'm conflicted now. Just watch both. It'd be cool.
Just watch it. Well, look, Bart, we hope you have a wonderful time celebrating your daughter's birthday, and good luck with what's to come in the coming weeks.
Cheers. Thank you very much. Good luck with your 100th anniversary of this podcast.
Go on, Sjoukje. It's your outro.
Oh, shit.
In your own time.
Yeah. So a huge thanks to our guest this week, Bart. Thank you so much for being on the show. Thanks also to our sound and editing wizards, Ben and Louis, our producer, Marcel, who is now responsible of pressing the record button. And of course, to all of our listeners. We're on LinkedIn and X, Dave Chapman, Rob Kernahan, and Sjoukje Zaal. Feel free to follow or connect with us, and please get in touch if you have any comments or ideas for the show. And of course, if you haven't already done that, rate and subscribe to our podcast. See you in another reality next week.